This is the Unshaw Podcast, the podcast about atheism, religion, and everything in between.
Good morning and welcome to the Unshaw Podcast. Today, I'm hunkered down, sheltering from the wild winds of Storm Bear. But undeterred, I bring you another thought-provoking episode. Last week, in the wake of the Archbishop of Canterbury's unexpected resignation, I had to make a quick pivot, bringing you a hastily organised interview with Nick Cowan. That meant postponing a conversation I'd been eagerly anticipating. But today, I'm thrilled to welcome back Dr. Jarle Breivik. Dr. Breivik is a professor of medicine at Oslo University and the author of a book, Making Sense of Cancer. In this book, he delves into a subject that will touch us all at some point, whether directly or indirectly. Join me in welcoming Dr. Breivik as he offers his perspectives on not just cancer, but also the broader, often uncomfortable topics of aging and mortality. Stay tuned for what promises to be a compelling conversation. Good morning, Jarle. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
So, cancer. Tell me all about cancer. And you've said you have an evolutionary perspective on cancer. So, tell us all about it.
Tell us all about cancer. Well, that's what I'm trying to do with the book, tell you everything about it. But the big picture is that you have cells inside our body that divide and spread uncontrollably. That is basically what cancer is. That's the textbook definition. My approach to this is that we have to see this in a larger context. Cancer is so much more than just these cells. It's a dreaded disease that we are going to eliminate, and we have to cure cancer. It's also a part of our culture about how we see ourselves, how we see the world. It's about money, inequality, about justice. It's even about love. And I'm trying to explain how cancer is alive. It's alive both in a metaphorical perspective, but also very literally. The cancer cells are quite literally entities that evolve inside our bodies. Making sense of cancer is also about making sense of life itself. And that is what I'm trying to do with this book.
You've insinuated that cancer is ultimately a living organism, which I guess is in a similar struggle for survival as we are. Is that right?
Exactly. So the cells are derived from our own normal cells, but they have evolved all the time. They evolve inside our body, and this process of diversion actually starts at the embryonic stage. And every time a cell divides, it gets new mutations. These mutations will accumulate over time. Most of them are irrelevant, and some of them are lethal to the cell or detrimental in other ways, and they will make the cell grow slower and even die. Our cells basically have two possible fates when they get old. They can either listen to the control mechanisms that are embedded in our genome that are telling our cells to shut down when they get old. But then you have mutations that make the cell grow faster. And that is where you get natural selection.
Okay, so what you're saying is that natural selection favours cells which are able to replicate very quickly. Therefore, it favours the cancer cells. A downside of the fast replication of the cancer cells is that the cancer cells eventually kill us, is what you're saying.
Yes. So not just that they're replicating fast, but they are able to survive in areas of the body where they shouldn't be. And this process is just a consequence of the fundamental principle of natural selection. Our cells are programmed to collaborate, to function as an organism. To do the purpose of the organism, of course, is to reproduce. And all our cells are working together for this common goal. They're programmed to do that. But if you get mutations, cells that don't adhere to this rule or this program will grow uncontrollably, and they will have an advantage inside this environment of our body.
And exactly how does cancer kill us? Could you explain that in layman's terms? What does cancer do to us exactly?
Oh, that is also a very complicated question. How does cancer kill us? It can kill us in a variety of ways, but the general principle is that the uncontrollable cells infiltrate our body, infiltrate tissues. They make havoc in our body and grow into the tissues where they shouldn't be. They disrupt circulation, they disrupt organ function. Cancer can also make us a lot more vulnerable to infections, and that is one way we get sick and die from cancer. So, yeah, how did cancer kill us? That's an interesting question, which perhaps is not fully explored from a scientific perspective.
Okay, so I did my research before speaking to you this morning, and around about 10 million people die of cancer each year, according to the World Health Organization. And apparently, globally, £200 billion is spent on cancer research, both in developing drugs and searching for a cure or whatever. And
you've written a book called Making Sense of Cancer, which was published recently, and apparently the British Medical Association recommended that King Charles read the book, what with his recent struggle with prostate cancer. So, His Majesty, if you're listening, and I'm sure you might be, take heed of what we discuss in this podcast. So, in this book, what new perspective are you giving on cancer? How are you suggesting that we should tackle cancer perhaps differently, or perhaps have a different perspective on it?
What I'm doing is more to take the full picture and present the full picture, and not just the perspective of the molecular cancer researcher who's trying to kill cancer cells. I'm trying to see the phenomena of cancer from many different perspectives, so that cancer cannot just be regarded as these cells that we are going to kill. You have to see it in the perspective of evolution, as we have already mentioned, but also in the perspective of society and economics, how we function as a culture and how we regard cancer as a culture. So how does my perspective differ from other perspectives or other books? It is that I'm trying to present all the different perspectives, all the different sides of the phenomena of cancer, and to draw them together into one integrated model of understanding. It's not just the perspective, as I said, of the researcher or the politician or even the alternative medicine, or the patients are, of course, very important, or the biologists. But I'm trying to put it all together and say, well, how does this creature or this phenomena of cancer look like if we try to see it from all these different dimensions? Can we make a model that makes sense? And that's what the book is about, really.
do you think, from a scientific perspective, that we will be able to kill cancer cells much more easily than we're doing at the moment, to the extent that it arguably constitutes a cure?
No, because there is something wrong with your question. First, you ask, can we kill cancer cells more effectively? And the answer is definitely yes. Can we cure cancer by killing cancer cells, like curing cancer, like getting rid of cancer as a disease in the population? The answer is definitely no. And here I have to give you a little more context, because cancer is fundamentally related to aging. In fact, cancer and aging are two sides of the same coin. So the better we get at treating cancer and other diseases, the longer we live. And accordingly, the more cancer there will be in the population. And that is exactly what we're seeing now. And that is why the public is so confused about cancer, because we see that the better we get at curing cancer, the more breakthroughs, the more money we put into it, the more cancer we get in the population. That's the paradox I'm trying to explain for people to understand, because a lot of people believe that the reason we are seeing more and more cancer in the population is because there are more toxins in our environment and we are exposed to all these bad influences from modern society. That is partly true, but in general, we are living longer than ever, so there must be something about modern society that is also quite good. The life expectancy in developed countries are higher than ever, and the better we get at treating cancer, as I said, the longer we live and the more cancer there will be. And it is this very confusing paradox that is so hard to accept, because there is not really a simple solution to it. It's not possible to cure cancer or to end cancer once and for all, as Obama once said in his last State of the Union address, or now Biden is going to end cancer as we know it. And that is not really possible to end cancer because it's so fundamentally linked to aging.
Yeah.
If you are going to cure cancer once and for all, we have to cure aging. And then we have to start a whole different discussion about what will that imply? What does it mean to cure aging? Is that where we're going? What will that do to our society?
And I've heard the sentiments expressed, and perhaps you can confirm this or otherwise, is that everybody would succumb to cancer if they were to live long enough. Is there some truth in that?
Yes, there definitely is. There are scientific evidence to support that. If you do an autopsy of people that are really old, you will find that almost all of them have early stages of cancer somewhere in their body. The older you get, the more likely you are to die of cancer. That's for sure. And the older you get, the more likely you are to die with cancer as well.
So how do you think we should change as a society with regards to how we perceive and deal with cancer? What should we be doing differently, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, we, and with that I mean especially the cancer research community, the cancer societies around the world, national research institutes, should start communicating more openly and honestly about how cancer really works. Not try to pretend that we're just about to solve the problem. Give us another billion and we will cure cancer once and for all. That is not how it works, and we should stop pretending and communicating this to the general public, even though it may hurt the funding of research on cancer, because as scientists, we shouldn't mislead the public. It's a white lie because we are afraid of hurting the funding. But it will hurt us in the end, and we already see that, because people are starting to question cancer research in general, because we have promised the cure for more than 50 years, and they can see that it's more cancer than ever before. It is not that Big Pharma is hiding the cure, which a lot of people, an astonishing number of people on social media, actually believe that the pharmaceutical industry has the cure for cancer, but they are hiding it because it will hurt their economic model. We, as cancer researchers, people are interpreting our white lie as a conspiracy, and that is terrible.
So when Obama and Joe Biden said that, we will find a cure for cancer or whatever, you're suggesting they're being disingenuous. Perhaps not deliberately, and perhaps it's a false sense of hope that they give out these promises. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think I'm not sure how deliberate it is. I think in politics are more concerned about moving public opinion than about telling the truth. I think we can agree on that. But as scientists, as a research community, the National Institute of Health in America, they should stand up to this and say that this is not how it works. And I know there are people trying, but they're being pushed back because it's so much easier to just say that we need more money instead of telling the big complex issue that, no, the better we get at curing cancer and other diseases, the more cancer there will be in the population, exactly because cancer is so fundamentally linked to aging. That's a more difficult story to tell. And there is no very simple solution to that. Then we have to start discussing how we're going to accept that we are mortal beings. That is why we're now in this huge problem where the healthcare systems are not able to cope anymore. And we see that the more we innovate, the better we get at keeping people alive, the more cancer we get. That's really a very simple logic, but we have to accept that we are not going to solve the problem with some magical cure.
Yeah. And I guess it's a similar situation with things like Alzheimer's and dementia, isn't it? That 100 years ago, it wasn't such a problem. But with increasing lifespans, we've got more of it around. And it's a burden, although that seems to be too strong a word. It is a burden on society to look after people who have been kept alive for a long time. What you seem to be saying as well is that it's the fear of death which is perhaps at the heart of our obsession with cancer. Would that be something that you would agree with?
Very much, yes. I've gone so far that I've written a commentary in Norway's largest newspaper with the heading, "Why I Hope to Die of Cancer," to address the problem that we are especially so afraid of cancer. The truth is that the healthier we live, the longer we live, and the more likely we are to die of cancer. So that's also a big paradox. So if you want to live a long and healthy life, you should really prepare for cancer. And I'm referring to Richard Smith, Dr. Richard Smith, the former editor of the British Medical Journal, who some years ago wrote a blog on the British Medical Journal where he said that cancer is the best death. And he got a huge backlash. But his line of argument was actually quite sensible. And he said that there are principally 4 ways of dying. You can either die quickly, by surprise, getting a heart attack or an accident or whatever. And a lot of people would prefer that, at least on first thought. They would say, oh, yeah, that's the easy way out. Well, what about the living? What about the people standing behind? Wouldn't it be nice to have a proper goodbye and to prepare? Maybe we should reconsider romanticizing the quick death. And then he goes on and he says, well, the second way of dying is from Alzheimer or like neurodegenerative diseases, dementia, where your identity, yourself, your consciousness disappears before the body. And he says that, to me, that's absolutely the worst imaginable way of dying. And the third way of dying is from organ failure. Like you can have heart failure or chronic lung disease or kidney failure. And then you're in and out of the hospital, you're on a lot of medication, and death is kind of unpredictable. So he's not sure if that's much better either. And then you're stuck with cancer. You get some months or years of warning. You have time to prepare, but when it first sets in, it's kind of quick. I think perhaps what got the biggest backlash was that he said that the pain I can moderate with whiskey and morphine.
Okay. Going to the issue of pain, in cancer? I mean, is it a particularly painful demise, dying of cancer, or can that be managed with opiates and pain-killing drugs and so on?
Today it can, but I'm not romanticizing. Cancer is a terrible disease, and it is for a lot of people, especially before we had modern medicine, it was really a terrible disease. And that is probably why, or at least some of the reason why it got this status as this enormous enemy and this monster coming to get us. So I'm definitely not romanticizing, but you're absolutely right to comment on that, because I think that's perhaps the biggest fear people have. They're not so much afraid of dying, they're more afraid of dying painfully.
And we can control that pain to a certain extent, you're saying, through pain-killing drugs. And it was quite interesting as well that you mentioned that in comparison to the sudden death, you've got warnings, you've got months, years or whatever to make up with people that you've fallen out with, say goodbye to people, this sort of thing. And of course, you don't have that opportunity, do you, if you're run over by a bus or you have a sudden heart attack? So what are you suggesting that society needs to do differently, or what mentality, what mindset do we need to have with regards to cancer that we're not doing at the moment? How do we need to change, in your opinion?
Well, we need this deeper, more nuanced understanding and not just see cancer as an enemy that we need to kill and that we believe that we can get rid of. Because we know, and everybody in cancer research knows, that it's not possible to get rid of cancer by killing cancer cells. But if we accept that cancer is a natural consequence of aging, then maybe we also have to have a different perspective on death. Is death by cancer or other age-related diseases something we should continue to fight with all means, an increasing amount of society's resources, or is cancer and death from old age something we should accept?
Okay, so what you seem to be suggesting is that ultimately something that's going to happen to all of us, or may happen to all of us if we to live long enough, it's just aging. Therefore, are you saying that we should not put as many resources into finding a cure for cancer or treatments for cancer? Are you saying those resources would be better spent somewhere else within the healthcare system?
Well, I'm not in any position to judge, because my agenda is to explain how these mechanisms, how this phenomena works. And hopefully then people can make up their own mind about how much resources should we spend on curing cancer. And the argument, which is obvious against what I'm saying, of course, is what about young people getting cancer?
Yeah. What about the child who gets leukemia or whatever? And presumably that point has been put to you previously. And how do you respond to it?
Then I'm back to what I said about, I'm not saying that we should stop cancer research. I'm not saying that we shouldn't try everything we can to cure a child from cancer. What I'm saying is that the technological development that we are driving because we are trying to cure cancer and other diseases involves a huge paradox. I have no illusion that we are going to stop, or that it's possible to stop the technological development these days. I'm just trying to explain what is happening so that we don't go into this future with our eyes closed, but we can see that there are consequences. And it's a very difficult message to balance exactly because of this. Because if you say that we should spend less money on cancer research because it has some unforeseen consequence related to technology and how much money we should spend on longevity instead of the rising generations, instead of the quality of life.
Yeah.
Health span instead of lifespan, for example.
Okay.
To be very honest, I don't have any simple solutions, but I don't think we should shut our eyes and say that now we're just going to continue to try to kill cancer cells as effectively as possible and to extend life as long as possible. That's our mission, and we don't care about the consequences of biotechnology or even AI, which is also a factor in this development.
And you discuss also the idea that humans might have the capability to extend their life to 150 years. Is that going to be scientifically possible?
I think it's definitely possible to expand human lifespan quite radically. I think we can do some with improved lifestyle, and we have seen that better living conditions has taken us a long way. Now we're seeing that we are pushing the limits of our own biology, and that's where cancer, Alzheimer's disease, other age-related diseases are kicking in, and we seem to kind of hit the roof with what we can do by just improving lifestyle, and now we have to go in and use our knowledge in biotechnology. And the question is, how radically are we going to change our own biology to live beyond our biological limits? And I'm sure we're going to push that limit and be able to keep the human body alive almost indefinitely with biotechnology. In theory, I think that would be possible. We would have to rejuvenate all the cells of our body like with stem cells. We're already in a position where we can rejuvenate the blood system with stem cell transplantations for some cancers and other immunological diseases where you can actually eradicate your old blood system and you can get yourself a new one by transplantation. The problem with this model where we are rejuvenating the body piece by piece is that at some point we come to the brain, and then the question is, can we rejuvenate the brain and still be ourselves? And then we can go one step further and we can say, well, it's not really the body we care about, is it? We will all be quite happy when we get really old and we change our body into a new one. And what we are really after preserving is our selves, our consciousness, our egos. And that is where authors and researchers have asked the question, can we upload ourselves to the digital world? Is that the future? And I'm thinking that certainly it looks like that's a direction technology is heading now, where more and more of what is happening in the world is transferred to the digital world. And soon, maybe we will move ourselves and even our consciousness to the digital world. That is, of course, science fiction today, but current scientific understanding that it would be possible to transfer what is happening in the brain that is giving us consciousness. I think most researchers agree that it is a physical phenomena that possibly can be transferred to another medium, like the digital medium.
Now, what would transferring oneself to the digital world actually look like now? It sounds awfully science fiction-y. What would that existence be like? Almost like you're speculating that we will have this sort of online avatar where it's able to interact with people and give opinions on things.
Well, the honest question is that I have absolutely no idea. But if I were to speculate, we are currently uploading all our memories, all our opinions, all our pictures, all our social interactions, all our positions in the world, even all our medical records. Our genome may soon be digitalized for every single person, and our epigenomes and our proteomics and everything can be transferred to the digital world. So everything about us, soon there will be more information about us in the digital world than in our own brain. And it will certainly be more accessible. So if all that information about us as people, as persons, are up there in the cloud, if we could call it that, or it's in this digital medium, then you don't need that much of intelligence or a system, artificial intelligence, to get this thing going and behaving as maybe not exactly yourself, but as a replica or a model of yourself.
Okay, in your book, you seem to be suggesting that the journey towards longevity and extending our life is undesirable. Why do you think it's undesirable for us to want to live longer?
We're now back to the question of how much of society's resources should we spend on fighting the natural end of life? How much money should we spend on curing cancer, even at old age? To get cancer as a child is tragic, and it's fortunately quite rare. To get cancer at a young age can be explained by an unfortunate combination of environmental and genetic factors. So you may call it bad luck, really. But to get cancer in your 80s, that is really quite natural. It's very common. It is one of the mechanisms that we are programmed to die from, really. If we don't die from other things first, we will eventually get cancer. And then the question is, how much resources are we going to spend to try to prevent or extend life beyond our natural lifespan, instead of using that money on life quality in our earlier years, and especially for young people and children? How much money should we spend on healthcare for the aging population that are pushing the limits for life, versus how much money should we spend on giving our children the best possible upbringing?
And there's certainly a danger, isn't there, that if longevity ends up being an expensive pursuit, if longevity takes up a lot of resources and is costly, then we'll arrive at some sort of two-tier situation where the wealthy can afford to extend their lives, but those who are not can't afford to do so. And there's all sorts of issues with a situation like that, isn't there?
This is not something that is going to happen. It is happening as we speak. People that are resourceful and got access to healthcare and technology, they generally live significantly longer than people of lesser means already. Imagine that within, let's say, a few decades, there will be this biotechnological therapy that somehow renews our tissues, and it costs, like, say, £1 million per year to keep people alive beyond their natural death. Obviously, not everybody will have access to this. So will we have a society where there are rich people that just keeps on living, and many of them, as we know, are perhaps the biggest narcissists of all, and they keep on living while poor people die perhaps even sooner than they do today? Is that the direction our society is heading? Then we should probably have some kind of regulation on this technology.
Okay, so we're drawing to a close. For our listeners, what can people do to remain cancer-free naturally? Now, obviously, there's not being a smoker, presumably excessive alcohol intake causes cancer, and be interesting to hear actually your perspective on whether stress can cause cancer and whether it can sometimes be almost psychosomatic.
Well, as I said earlier, we can really just postpone cancer development. We can delay it. That's the overarching perspective on it. But how can we delay cancer You're exactly right. We're back to the boring stuff. It is to avoid tobacco, not smoking, so alcohol, to limit that, healthy eating, and of course we should not have excessive UV radiation, so we shouldn't on our skin, so we should limit how much time we spend in the sun. There is also this huge debate, as you probably aware of, where should we use sunscreen or not? Is the sunscreen carcinogenic in itself? So, and all of that. And the simple answer is that we should limit how much time we spend in the sun. And if you're going to spend a lot of time in the sun with your bare skin, then you should use sunscreen. It's really that simple. There is no magical cure. It's not something you can eat that will show that you don't get cancer. And even if you do everything right, and you exercise, and you don't smoke, and you don't drink, there is still a chance, a smaller chance, but there is still a chance that you will get cancer, not just when you're 80, but even before. Of course, that is really bad luck, but there is no magical solution to the problem.
Prevention, or rather, more accurately, delaying cancer, is more important and should have more resources allocated to it, perhaps, than trying to cure it once it's there.
It's not just about telling people. It is about how we organize our society and our healthcare system so that we get as much for our money as possible in terms of good quality life. And I think most people will agree that we don't get the best quality of life by spending all our money on developing very advanced biotechnology to keep people alive for as long as possible. How can we assure a good end of life, like palliative care? That is what we should use our resources on. Instead of spending so much resources on trying to extend life, maybe we should use more of our resources on a good end of life.
Dr. Breivik, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me. It's been a really interesting discussion.
As we near the end of this series of the Unshaw Podcast, I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you found our discussion with Dr. Jarle Breivik as insightful and thought-provoking as I did. If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, I highly recommend checking out Dr. Breivik's book, Making Sense of Cancer. It offers a fresh perspective on the themes we've explored today, and it's a must-read for anyone interested in understanding cancer, aging, and life's bigger questions. You can also connect with Dr. Breivik directly on X. His handle is @Jarle Breivik. That's and JarleBreivik. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you for your continued support. Your engagement and curiosity makes this journey worthwhile. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you for your continued support. Your engagement and curiosity makes this journey worthwhile. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep exploring the world around you. This is the Unshaw Podcast, signing off.